Hello, my friends. You know, it's interesting in a time like this where you've got this giant change from one era to another one that those of us in the futures business, at least this guy in the futures business, spends a good bit of time trying to look for the kind of weak signals and the early indicators that are pointing toward the new emerging world. The transition is necessarily kind of evolutionary. It might be very rapid, relatively rapid evolutionary, but it's very much like essentially one would propose, like the way complex systems change state, like water freezing, for instance, where as you get down to the freezing point of water, it doesn't just turn to ice. What happens is that you get little crystals here, here, and then you get, as the temperature decreases, then you get aggregation around the crystals, and they get bigger and bigger, and then the whole dynamics accelerate and become kind of exponential, and then it runs really quickly, and then it all kind of becomes ice. And so complex systems, you do a state change, you go from one era to another era. It's fair to assume that you're going to have these little emergent little crystals around that are giving you an indication of what the new world might look like. And that's very true. I mean, you've got all kinds of things in just about every discipline that you look at. If you look at the changes or the emergent kind of capabilities, characteristics, the off the wall kind of things that are kind of showing up, you'll find, whether it's in energy or transportation or whatever, all of these things are generating kind of emergent characteristics that have a really high likelihood to kind of solidify together and become integral aspects of the new world that shows up. It happens, like I say, kind of writ large. And it shows up in metaphysical other kind of spaces. The whole alien thing is a wonderful example of this rapid increase in awareness and such, and of this thing that could just be giant in character and significance and shape and color the whole future and world in the future. So you see that show up in the way that I look at this world, and you say, an early indicator that could point to something else. And then you look around and you see other such things like new energy things. The whole cold fusion business was certainly a weak signal, an early indicator of where the future of the technology or energy would come. I've given speeches for years saying that the future is an all electric world. You could see all the pieces coming together. The question only is, how do you generate the electricity and so on? You can see similar kind of things in terms of electronic technology. And I can tell you right now that kind of the dirty little secret of a lot of the technology that we have is all about in battery life and design, and that they're greatly hindered by the technology. It's the weak link in the whole system. And when I've already been exposed to some solid state batteries that were used. The technology from microprocessors, essentially, you lay down in the same way that you do semiconductors and and processors and integrated circuits. So you could lay down a battery thing and it just charges about that fast, and it has deep, long kind of significant power endurance, and it weighs about a tenth of the weight of regular batteries. Those kinds of things. Once you see them coming and you work your way back into the present world, you say, aviation isn't going to be the same if that one shows up. And so it is a kind of across the spectrum that there are many people who are, and they may not necessarily think of it in these kinds of terms, but they are coming up with ideas that have a distinct possibility of being part of the new fabric that's coming downstream. And a lot of these ideas are the responses to enduring issues and problems that we have in the world today. That is, I would argue, the kind of the principal motivator, the incentive that is behind almost all big breakthroughs and other such things, and that is that they're trying to solve some kind of an existing problem of one sort or another. And you may not know, in Steve Jobs kind of classic terms, you may not know that you really need an iPhone, but when somebody else who has that kind of vision is able to articulate and bring something together and put it in front of you, suddenly everything turns on and you see a whole new world, and there's capabilities and opportunities, possibilities that you just never thought was possible, and they just explode in front of your face. And so there's a lot of people all over I'm running into that have different kind of ideas. They send me stuff, they send me books, they want to come by and talk to me. And of late, I've had a number of folks kind of talk in terms of future economics, or they usually are cast in terms of what are the issues and the problems of the present system, and how would we kind of fix that. And it's not just economics in general, it's really finance and how the whole financial system works and such. And it's interesting because I've had the common kind of notion, an idea that has shown up, I don't know, 3 times in the last maybe month or so, which is enough in our business, my business, to being a futurist, to say, hey, wait a second, 3 times in a month is potentially a trend. And so you want to kind of keep an eye and look at that. And the I have had, and like I say, a number of folks who have suggested to me that the problem with all of our money is that is our money, right? The problem with our financial system is the money, and that essentially we got to figure out a way to get rid of the money. Now, just this is not a novel idea, right? Many of us have all thought about how screwed up the currency system of, and how people just run around thinking that because there's digits and on a hard drive that somehow they're richer, that they have a lot of assets, and there's really nothing there. But it's everybody thinks it's there and acts like it's there, and so it keeps the lubricates the system and makes the whole thing work. And I've had a couple of folks who have said, we just have to get rid of the money. Let's just barter. Let's just let's just barter and do this. Well, that's a common kind of notion. Somebody, in fact, just this last week said from England called me and said, we need to have our own kind of community, and we ought to have our own money, and not be kind of in the role of the governments and such. And yeah, okay. That might sound work. I had another one who said, let's just barter everything. And like I say, it's not like this is a new idea. I told this guy who I was talking to, I said, it sounds like concurrent currencies to me. That there are these alternative currencies. There's over 2,500 of them in the United States alone, where there is some amount of script that some town, Albany, New York, is one of the first ones, and there are many other kind of places, and they generate a local kind of currency. They sell it they give change when somebody comes in and pays in US dollars. They give them change in the local currency, and they give them a surplus. They give them 10% more. So if they then turn around and use it in town, because all of the merchants have kind of agreed that they'd take this local currency, then there's a 10% advantage to the whole thing. A lot of advantages to that in social terms. You keep the money and you roll it around inside, and it turns into real advantages. But this guy was, and if I understood him correctly, there's always a chance that I misunderstood him. But it sounded to me like kind of an idea that has been around a good bit. And there are all kinds of people who are trying one way or another. Yeah, and it reminded me of one of the other people who had talked to me about doing bartering. And there's an interesting kind of a couple of notions relative to money that need to be kind of understood as you kind of navigate your way through these kinds of things and think about how a new world might work. I mean, everybody I know who has a reason to have a legitimate opinion about how alien life works says they don't have any money. Okay, so how does that work? How do you get from here to there? How does that work? Well, I can tell you in one way, in that the only way that barter works is if you have a trusting relationship with somebody. And almost certainly when it starts to scale, that you have a trusting relationship with the exchange that is keeping track of who put beans in today and who wants their shoes shine tomorrow and all of those kinds of things, and how you trade them off. And then, if you don't have, or if you have a cantaloupe, and a cantaloupe was worth 2 shoe shines, then how do you, you can kind of do a side deal with the guy and say, okay, you owe me a shoe shine, or yeah, it's doable, but it's clunky, and it doesn't really really work very well, and which then requires an exchange that keeps track and the relative value and the balance that people have in their account. And of course, none of that works in the town down the road, because they don't have your money. And So now you got a problem. Oh, if you go to the next town, say you're going to go on a trip and you drive 500 miles away, and you want to stay at a hotel, and they're not going to take your money. They're going to take whatever their money is that maybe they're still doing US dollars or whatever the currency happens to be. So now you've got it. Now you got issues because now it's like running around Europe before the EU showed up. I remember traveling around and you'd have 8 different kinds of money in your pocket and you're sitting there trying to figure out which one is which. I mean, it becomes kind of second nature, I suppose, to Europeans, but it was all these colored things in different sizes and whatever. And, it's just, but nevertheless, you got to kind of work between places, and the role of money is to provide a trusted mechanism for exchanging values with people that you can't trust, right? That you don't know. And so that are at a distance, and they produce things that you don't have. Maybe they build cars. I don't know. Maybe they've got watermelons and you need watermelons, but it's down the road. So it's and you can't kind of barter that out because it's too far away and such. And so you need this kind of trusted method element of exchange. It's all what it does is it's an artifact. It's an alternative to the trust that you have around the people that you know and that you have confidence in and you have history with, and so you trust them. And so if somebody says, here's $10, I'll pay you back next week, you say sure, because you trust them. But if it's somebody that you've never seen or heard before, and they say, give me $100 and I'll come back, you say, wait a second, that's the whole deal. The whole thing that holds the whole thing together is trust. And somewhere there is a space out there where the way that we commonly deal with exchanging value, providing exchange of value, is going to get into a space where all of the paper and even some of the computer kind of things and other kind of stuff that we have, which are obviously kind of clunky. There's nothing that kind of, you got credit cards and this and that and what, and it's just it's on its way to something else and somewhere else, and it's not there yet, but you can see. I mean, they're trying to do central bank currency, currencies with the blockchain, and and that's got all kinds of issues and problems. And then the trust business, then you wonder who's got the back door that can shut this off or change it or whatever. And all of these systems have, if you don't have trust, the thing doesn't work. And so it's all about alternatives. Alternative ways in which you can transfer value in a trusting kind of context. There's also the issue that whatever this medium of exchange that you have has to have a known value. Because how many shoe shines can you get for whatever you are going to give them? There needs to have some kind of parity, some standard, some datum that kind of keeps track of what this stuff is worth. And all of that, again, is intrinsically tied to trust. Let me give you an example. Money or currency has no known certain value until it's spent, right? If I told you that this is worth $10, it is, you would be, it would be fair for you to say, you're stupid, it's a Post-it note, that's not worth $10. But if somebody really needs a Post-it note, and I can provide them with a Post-it note, then it might be worth $10, right? And you only know if you spend it. What that means is if you got a bunch of money in the bank, you do not know what its value is. The only way you know what its value is when you present it to somebody and they decide whether they're going to give you some goods or services in response. It's an interesting kind of notion. You got to think of it in different kind of terms, because if you got $10 million in the bank, then you're kind of in a different kind of space, because you deal with money and you think about money in a different kind of way, or $100 million or whatever else. There is the changes in values value is at the edges. If the money, if the pound and the dollar change in value, sure, but you still got enough to deal with. If it's got a lesser amount, though, then it really starts, and you're really dependent upon it, then it becomes far more significant. And so if the value of what you can buy with it, as determined by whatever the exchanges are, if that changes, then it makes a whole lot of difference. And I guess the important point that I'd like to make, or certainly it seems important to me, and that is that you can be sitting on a whole lot of money, or a significant amount of money in your bank account, and in absolute terms, it has no certain value. If it's in digital, if it's in binary dots, bits and not and so on, then it's quite obvious that it could be hacked and it could be changed, and what you thought you had would not be there, and it wouldn't work. The value becomes apparent. The value becomes valuable when you spend it, when you're able to convert it into goods and services. Now, this is interesting to me, because I'm interested in helping to make this world better, and helping to build a new world, and help to facilitate this transition to a new world. And you say to yourself regularly, how do you do that? What are the component parts, and what do you need in order to do that? And what becomes very clear in the system that we live in right now, which certainly could change in material ways downstream, but right now, you can't get there without spending money, right? You can have a whole lot in your bank account, and it won't make any difference to make the world better. Just zero. It will not make your life any better directly. Zero, because it sits there in the bank and it doesn't do anything. You're not going to be able to enjoy a great many other kind of options that are available in this kind of lifetime without spending some of that money. It's the process of converting this money that determines what the value is, and by the way, produces material change in our society. And that's really kind of counterproductive or counterintuitive to the way lots of people think about money, particularly very wealthy people, because their objective is largely to acquire as much as they can, in lots of different kind of ways. And if you just sit on it and you have a whole lot, you don't make anybody's life any better. You don't make your life better. And the whole notion of getting a new world and a new human is all about how do you convert value into the emergence of a new world, and how do you change the way people live or how they can live to make it better, and so they can rise to the occasion and become new humans. And they can't do that without the money changing hands and showing what its value is. Obviously, the value changes different seasons, a different thing. A hotel is going to change at different times, and so on. And so, what you can buy with the money is uncertain, to a certain degree. But what is really certain is that if you want to make changes in other people's lives, if you want to live your life to the fullest, if you want to take the best advantage of what life we all have left on this planet, you can just kind of walk yourself down these kinds of things about how everything gets better, or we get better, or other kind of stuff. What it means is that you got to spend money. Now, I'm not going to belabor this and go on for a long time, but there are a lot of folks who sit on a whole lot of money from the bank, significantly more than they need. And it's largely because they're afraid that they are afraid of the future, and they're afraid that things might change and they may not be able to do what they provide for themselves or their family or their other such things. And so the money functions as a cushion to offset the fear that they have about the future. I have known individuals who had very large amounts of money, and they principally sat around every night and looked at their balance sheet and their bank statement, and they counted it all out, and then they checked their stocks and the bonds and whatever the thing, and kind of figure out what got new and what they get. And I can tell you that they would have made a whole lot more difference in their lifetime and in this world and for a lot of other people if they had taken the point of view of what's the nice lady's name who was married to one of the big .com zillionaires, one of those guys that maybe I forget her name, and she's just decided billions of dollars. All she's going to do is give it all away. He's not just being nice, and she's not just being charitable, and of course she is, and philanthropic, but she is turning that into value and expanding her life and doing the things that if she sat around with it on it all the time and all she did was count the stuff, then it wouldn't be the same. And so I'm just trying to kind of build in your regular kind of outline here about where this all is going and how this kind of new human emerges and what's on some of the underlying kind of principles might be that would allow and encourage this explosion of kind of opportunity and options and joy and other kinds of things that would come if you didn't have to worry about how the system was going to sustain itself and you were going to be able to sustain yourself and so on. There is an interesting new ground. It's not a middle ground, I don't think, but it's a new ground that is far beyond, I think, just simple barter. It certainly is past currencies as we understand it. There's some kind of new idea that's going to emerge downstream that is going to facilitate, it's going to allow this emergence of this new human in a new world. And it's going to be based upon a whole bunch of other principles. And one of them, I'd argue, is that it almost certainly will be based upon some set of principles that will allow the flourishing and the great kind of liquidity that would come from lots of folks and kind of letting their kind of their resources loose and available to as many people as they can, because there's a change in the whole idea about what you need and why you need it and so on. And so I'm interested in these new ideas that people come up with, but I think there's something really interesting and new that's coming downstream, and it's going to really be tied to everybody kind of becoming their best and becoming as much as they can, and not constrained by pieces of paper or digits in a computer, which limit what you can be. So we'll come back and talk about some more of that later.